Hi everyone. So engaging with our digital community, this is just a snapshot of how we do things at the Science Park and what's worked for us. So, Birmingham Science Park is literally just across the road. Third oldest science park in the UK. It's owned by Birmingham City Council. It's one of only two in the country that is owned by a local authority, sorry. It's 14 acres, 10 buildings, some of which are not exactly fit for purpose, so we're looking at an investment programme on that. It's our aim with what we have, it's our mission to create a science park fit for 2020, a 21st century environment for Birmingham's future entrepreneurs. Science parks are there to help to nurture startups. Birmingham Science Park specialises in tech, other science parks specialise in medtech, biotech, so we are there about the digital community. So this is where we are. We've got Millennium Point here, literally it's a 6-minute walk over to the Science Park, but the whole area in purple are the buildings that we look after. This is the flagship building. This is the Faraday Wharf Innovation Centre, which is a great picture. It's actually 12 years old. But within that building, these are some of our tenants. There are, it's around 44,000 square feet, but there are 40 individual units within the building. And the units are there to help startups to grow from one unit onto the next in 3 or 4 months' time, onto the next in a year's time. So that's what the building is there for. And then there is larger space in the other buildings on the park. So it's a vibrant place. Also, if I just click back, there are 7 different meeting rooms and conference facilities here, including our Ideas and Communications Suite, which is where we operate our Science Park Without Walls programme, which is about linking our startups with investors and knowledgeable influencers from across the world. So it's Skype on heat, it's high-tech, high-definition Cisco video conferencing, operated through a system called Tandberg. But there are lots of other institutions across the world that use the same technology. But it just means that meetings can happen without the breakdowns that you get on Skype, and it's real size. It's 65-inch screens where you can share presentations and content, not just speak as if you're on holiday. So back we go. So the workplace is changing. The types of people that we're interested in working with are more kind of the work on your laptop, the Google community, less so the entrepreneurs who might be willing to jump off a cliff if their funding doesn't come through. But you know, we're obviously very aware that the workplace is changing. Our flagship building is 12 years old, let alone the rest on the 30-year-old park. So we are in the process of getting planning and funding for the Digital Plaza. The first building in the Digital Plaza is the iCentrum building. Within iCentrum, there will be a £1 million Cisco Living Lab. The latest technology to be launched by Cisco will be sent directly to the iCentrum building at the Science Park, so that Birmingham will be able to work with this new technology, give Cisco feedback on it. It'll be very much a two-way process. So every time new technology is brought out, the kit will be replenished. So you can't say that, you know, every new building, they're saying, well, yeah, this is the most sustainable building, it'll be amazing for the next 35 years. That simply isn't a claim anyone can make. But we're looking with this building at putting in a programme that will make sure that the building is very exciting going forwards, not just for the first couple of years that it's there. And then on the first floor will be a very exciting incubator programme. So the incubator programme that we have in Faraday Wharf will certainly be extended. So this is the future of our buildings. And this is how it links with, so this is Faraday Wharf here, and then there'll be a bridge across to the iCentrum building and the other Digital Plaza buildings. So that's what the future looks like. But in the meantime, how do we communicate with our community? So if we take Science Park Without Walls out of the equation, because that's really about one-to-one conversations with very wealthy investors in Silicon Valley, what do we do with our regional, national, but yes, international community as well? So this is just a really fascinating slide just to say, of course, it's all about digital. This is saying that, yeah, all of the communities that are going places are pretty much on Facebook. When you look at that map, China is white, not black. But I realise China does have its own closed Facebook system. But this is where it's going. You know, it's all about communicating digitally. And it's also about what will the kids of tomorrow want. Technology is no longer something that mediates experience, it pervades it. So big claims there, but what we're all aware of is this iPad generation is just getting younger and younger and younger. So how do we work with it? How do we adjust? So, one too many. Tools for the job. It's a fast-changing marketplace, as Anthony was saying. We need to look every day, every week, every month as to how do we need to change, how do we need to engage differently, and we just have to be flexible. The tools that we use a lot right now are WordPress, so that we can content manage our websites. Eventbrite we use a lot. We just feel that that really does help to cut down the administration on our events. It enables us to do more events. Campaign Monitor for issuing out our newsletters in an effective way. When people sign up to our events are really important to us. When you sign up on Eventbrite, we then make sure it goes through to Campaign Monitor so that our newsletters have a bigger reach every month. Twitter, incredibly important. LinkedIn, we've said online advertising rather than print. We do so little print advertising. The beauty of online, it can link directly to your website. But for us, you know, tools for the job, there are many out there. These are just the ones that we use. Facebook is not one we feel is right for the science park. We're communicating with very digitally savvy people who feedback to us that they would rather communicate with us on Twitter than on Facebook. And we just get told Facebook is for our mates and for consumer brands, not for a science park. So that's why we don't use it. So just going more into detail, engaging with our external community, what we find is crucial is content. So we make sure we've got one press release announcement per week. When we say a press release, we say something that's worthy of the media covering it, a news announcement. You know, we're very, very lucky. We've got so many tenants with fantastic stories that, you know, we're able to run on the back of those as well as issue our corporate announcements. So our press releases are incredibly varied, but rather than look at it as just something that we can issue out to the media and see what sticks, you know, we'll have a different strategy for every press release, but it also then goes onto our LinkedIn group, it goes into our newsletters, it goes onto our bulletins. It is really important. So 80 events per year. What we're looking to create is more face time with the people that matter to us. You know, we want to get people into the building more. We want to get them taking space, hiring meeting rooms. It is a business at the end of the day. So that event program is crucial. But then going back onto Twitter, Birmingham Science Park proudly has got the most followers of any science park in the country. So when you think about Cambridge and such, there are actually lots of innovation centres there, but if you look at their pure science parks, we're leading the way. So hopefully that can continue. How do we use Twitter? announcements, links to our news pieces. We have some banter on there. We promote our events. What's key to us is tweeting during our events so that people who aren't there can heckle us back. It also kind of creates a bit of a record. It makes people in the room follow us whilst they're there. So they're leaving and we've kind of captured them. Okay, they can unfollow us, but we find that helps. And also for generating questions for the speakers. So if we had Twitterful here, you could be tweeting your question to me, and then it could be picked up after the presentations have finished. So Twitterful, we think, really is effective during events. And yet, retweets, Follow Friday, engaging conversations. LinkedIn group, we're not so good at compared to Twitter. We've only got 160 on our LinkedIn group, so please join our LinkedIn group. But it's something that we're working on. It's something that we think is absolutely right for our audience. We just need to be a little bit better at growing that community. Monthly e-newsletter that goes out generally on the first of the month. It's very corporate looking, and again, that's based on the content from those press releases and our event programme. So it's the same format every month, but it really works for us. And then that gets grown back from the sign-ups that we have through Eventbrite. So that's our external community. Internally, with our tenants, we try and keep tweets about the park away from our @BHamSci Twitter, because we don't really want our community to be bombarded with what the soup of the day is if they're in Austin or Barcelona, or even if they're down the road. So @BSPA offers has all of that. So that's really where you get your spam. So then promoting tenant news announcements to ensure that the exposure for the park is maximised, as in if there's a news announcement from a tenant, we want to make sure that they would naturally put based at Birmingham Science Park on the press release. Otherwise, we kind of want to give them a hug and say, why don't we just do that PR for you, so that that announcement isn't lost. So the press exposure for the park is exceptionally high, but we've got to keep it that way. So it's a lot of partnering with the tenants on the park. We do a weekly tenant e-bulletin. It's literally just a glorified email, but very different to our kind of designed newsletters that go out. That really helps. And then a monthly detailed designed tenant e-newsletter, but in a different format to the external one. It's not corporate looking, and talks about, you know, profiles the different tenant, and there's lots of other announcements on there about the quiz that we do. So our offline things, monthly quiz, Christmas parties, charity initiatives, all the normal things that you would expect. So I think the message is that FaceTime is still so critical to us, and everything that we do digitally is about bringing it back to that. So, keys to success. Just check, what was that slide there? Maintaining momentum, really important. So this content again, if you haven't got content, what is there to talk about? Consistent tone of voice. Purposefully, there aren't many of us that tweet, and we try and kind of agree on that tone of voice, so that tweets don't become really corporate all of a sudden. We keep it pretty chatty, but we remember that this is our business Twitter account, not our own. So, you know, certainly no drunken tweets, but it is chatty. If you look through all of the Science Park tweets, you'll see that there's a very consistent tone of voice, which we're really proud of. And then, as Anthony was saying, monitoring is just so crucial. A, for justifying jobs. You know, us who are employed in communications, it's a hard market at that. You need to actually be able to show what you're doing and how you're improving month on month. So monitoring our Twitter followers, we monitor our followers against all of our competitors. And when we say competitors, our peers, I guess, is a better way of describing it. But science parks all over the country, incubators all over the country, innovation centres, you know, they all I guess, compete with us on a national level. But also for us, one of Birmingham Science Park's competitors is Fazeley Studios, the Custard Factory, looking at what they're doing. So it is really important. But we monitor followers rather than spending a fortune or internally losing a lot of time from looking at each individual tweet. We don't analyse it to that level. We just take the numbers. But then the campaign monitor stats, which get fed through Eventbrite, which is all about how many people sign up to our events. And so again, we look at those. And then it's about reviewing our mediums and making sure that we're still using the best mediums for us, focusing on the ones that we feel could be doing better, like LinkedIn. So a new dawn, we're forging forward. Our new building programme will be incredibly exciting, but it is about maintaining that momentum in the meantime and getting those messages out. And what we believe is crucial about Twitter, about our newsletters, about the relationships that we have with the media, is about when we have got something really important to say, we want it to be heard. So that's what it's all about. So please follow at Birmingham Sci Park. You really don't need to follow me, but I've put it on there. That's me. Cheers.